Hello and welcome to a Beyer Dynamic shootout. The reason for doing this one is simply I've got quite a few Beyer Dynamic mics now, and I figured that I'd just compare them all against each other. So before we start messing about, let's explain what we're doing. So you're listening to me now on the SM7B, Shure's Dynamic, that we use for a comparison. And then we've actually got, in no particular order, an MCE90, which is a condenser, side-fire condenser, an M201, which is a hypercardioid dynamic, and then we've got a couple of cardioids, which is the M69 and the M300, both of which are now probably described as vintage microphones. So what are we talking about? Well, the condenser is not a particularly new one. It's been around for quite a while now, 20 years at least, I think. Discontinued a while back, but a really nice mic. The M201, which is the hypercardioid, I've got a bit of a fond spot for these. A really chunky microphone for a small pencil mic. Hypercardioid, and really one of the big users of this mic were the BBC. So if you looked at a radio studio that was going to do speech as well as music, then you'd often find the 201s in Radio 4 studios where they're going to do speech, and it was a staple of BBC local radio for years. The 201 was the sort of microphone that you could put round a table, and when the presenter with a different microphone would have guests, they'd be using 201s. The BBC loved them, and I think it was because it's slightly narrower, which meant they could get a little bit more separation between people, especially when you got someone who's perhaps shouting a bit and someone who's more quietly spoken. It's easier to sort of juggle the faders and get a bit better balance if you use a hyper. And they're rather nice. I actually like those on drum overheads, which is a bit odd to use a dynamic as a drum overhead, but I quite like them. The M69 is rather sort of classy Beyer microphone, and some vocalists really like them. They have got a bit of a sort of characteristic sound to them, but M69s sort of go down well with really good singers. The M300 is a bit of a unknown quantity for me. I don't think I remember using it for ages. This particular one is quite old. I've got the original box, the original instructions, the sort of frequency response curves and things like that for it. So it's a bit of a collector's mic, I think, really, rather than one that you want to use. And this one's in pretty good nick. And I've had it for a while, but sadly just never really got round to using it. So I thought it's having an outing today. So there we go, 4 microphones. So shall we start on the comparisons and see how we get on? So let's get rid of the SM7B and we'll go straight to the MCE90. So this is the cardioid side-fire condenser mic that Beyer had. Now we're using it at a distance of about that. So my preferred sort of distance from a microphone. So this is the MCE90. It's not really a microphone that excites me too much. It seems pretty truthful, but it's just lacking a bit of character. So let's swap to the BBC favourite, the M201. So this is the one the BBC loved, and it's a hyper. If I actually just go off axis, you might get a bit better idea of how it deals with sounds that sort of tail off. So if I go across to one side and go across to the other side, it's not that narrow, so it's just handy. And a really nice, solidly made microphone. This one's been abused a fair bit, and it seems to cope with it quite well. Let's switch across to the M69. So now we've got the M69, and it has got a sort of characteristic sound. It's okay. It's probably not my go-to microphone, but it holds its own. And I say, it is quite liked by some singers, especially male singers with fairly low voices. They seem to find that the M69 gives them a bit better sort of rounder sound down the bottom. So it has got a home for that. So if you've got someone who sings low an M69 is not a bad mic to go for. A lot of the other mics, like the 58s, Beta 58s, they sort of run out of steam when things get a bit low, but the M69 seems to handle that a bit better. Now we're on the last mic of the four, the M300. And again, it's not a microphone to set the world on fire, I don't think. Always a solid performer, but all four of these have got slightly different tone to them. And if I now switch back to the SM7B, you'll hear the difference between what we would normally be listening to me on, the SM7B Shure. All of these at about the same distance from my mouth. So hopefully, if any of these get offered to you and someone says, oh, you know, there's a great deal on a microphone, you can now say you've actually heard what all of these Beyers sound like, and maybe will or won't give them a bit of a spin. Anyway, hope it's been useful. See you on the next video. Take care. Bye.